All right, everybody, welcome. It's another Wednesday, which means it's another Cougar Digest podcast episode. I'm Kevin Hossel here with Gatlin Stewart. Rob Sellers is having some internet issues right now, so we're hoping that he will jump on very shortly. And Blake is has some intramural football playoffs, I believe is what he said, to go to tonight. We have some things going on this show. We're talking a little bit about the game from last week and do a quick preview of the upcoming game that we have with TCU. Gatlin, how are things going tonight? How you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing good, Kevin. Thanks for asking. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. Always happy to be here on the show with everybody.
That's right. And no competition with the Willie Fritz show this week, so it should be a big audience.
That's right. It's all us. Yeah, that's right. So, we're going to have Jimmy Plunkett from the Horned Frog Blitz to come on very shortly to give us a little bit of information about the matchup this upcoming week. Well, let's kind of just talk a little bit about last week's game against Iowa State. I'm sure, we've talked about this thing on the board quite a bit. Another shutout. I believe the first back-to-back shutout for the University of Houston Cougar football team since 1994. A lot of people are obviously wondering what's going to happen with this team. Where are we going to next? What did you see from this last game, Gatlin, that kind of piqued your interest a little bit as far as what we may be doing here in the future?
Yeah, I had a couple notes from the game. I think first and foremost, everybody wants to lay this at the feet of Kevin Barbay. And again, I don't know how many ways I can say this. I'm not trying to defend the guy, but I think watching the game, Kevin Barbay, his only job is play calling on a game day. He doesn't do if you're going for fourth down, the call to punt from the midfield, those are typically head coach decisions.
Right.
So the thing, when you actually look at game management stuff that you can blame on Kevin Barbay is play calling. And when I watch the plays that are being called, conceptually speaking, they're great plays.
Yeah.
Genuinely, especially there's been some times where, I thought some of it was unimaginative. Against Iowa State, there was some good play calling. There were a couple head scratchers, but genuinely, I was impressed with some of the play calls that they came up with. A lot of that I feel like has to do with, it feels like they're kind of throwing everything at the wall right now to see what sticks from a perspective. I think a lot of that has to do with, as we get further into Big 12 play, realizing just how depleted the talent is offensively on this team. I don't think any of us really wanted to admit it. I feel like maybe we all kind of thought wide receiver, hey, maybe we lose a little bit, but it's ultimately a wash. We bring back Donovan Smith. Offensive line is actually, I think, probably the most improved unit on the team. You thought maybe you could do something here, but you got a lot of young wide receivers in a very complicated offense. So there were multiple times where you saw Donovan Smith and Zion Chris kind of throw like a duck, and you're like, "Oh my God, what is that?" No, they're option routes. So a big part of this Kevin Barbay offense is it's a read from the quarterback and the wide receiver. So the wide receiver is running like the Jonah Wilson throw, on the far sideline. I think was one everyone kind of maybe remembers where Jonah Wilson was running a go route. Donovan Smith threw it 10 yards, beneath his feet. Well, so the way you're reading that is, that cornerback, if it's a open or closed field, meaning, 2 or 3 safeties, or two or three high. And then, what does that cornerback do? So if you get, whatever their mark is down the field and the cornerback is still sitting over the top, It's either maybe a back shoulder throw or a comeback, right? I don't know. It depends. Without knowing what the play was, I can't say, but it's very clear. Like, hey, if you get here, cornerback is over top, turn around. If you're even with him or you got to step on him, keep going. Donovan threw the comeback or the back shoulder, and Jonah kept going. Saw that happen multiple times on option routes, seam routes, where like if the safety is inside, you're supposed to go straight. If he's over top of you, you bend it inside, and like there's just a lot of that reading of coverage that our young wide receivers just are not doing very well, and I think that's causing a lot of challenges, specifically in the passing game. But the other thing I saw, we were moving the ball. Because again, one of the things I heard was this week was, hey, we're calling too much. We're changing. We're not putting our guys in a position to be successful because we're changing everything up too much. I kind of disagree. I don't think, like, even with all of those issues, reading the defense, Donovan Smith and Zion Chris not being like, they're clearly a limiting factor at this point. Still, you were able to create positive momentum, and I counted 4 or 5 drives where like things were starting to click, and then you had a critical error, we'll call it. So either a 10-yard plus penalty, an interception, or a fumble.
Yeah.
Houston is -6 turnover margin this year. That's 121st in the country. That is your issue right now. It has nothing to do with play calling. If Houston would stop turning the ball over, I think this offense in ways is starting to click. I was impressed with the offense.
Agree.
I thought, even for all of the mistakes Donovan Smith has made, obviously the interception was horrible. Again, I've seen other people talk about it, so I won't rehash it, but Donovan Smith made the right read, technically speaking. You'd hope as a fifth-year quarterback, he peeks backside and sees what's going on, maybe, and sees the wide open. But it wasn't a bad read. It was a bad throw.
Yeah.
But so remove that play from the situation. I thought Donovan Smith, like, he didn't do. I don't want to say he didn't do a bad job, because he did, but you can see like he does some good things. Like his poise and presence and stand to the offense is good. Zion Chris did some good things. He is one of the most dynamic athletes in the Big 12. He's a young guy, so I think the speed of the game, like you can see, he's not comfortable reading a defense at all. Like he looks, if it's not there, he's taken off. So, but even with all of that, Houston's moving the ball. The problem is every time they get something going, they shoot themselves in the foot. So in some ways, like, I walk away from that being really encouraged, because this was, I think, the best Houston's offense in some ways has looked, actually, from just their ability to move the ball. It's these critical errors. You look at even the Zion Chris. I mean, like, he had that huge run, and it's negated by a block in the back. And so instead of 1st and 10 at the 20, now you're 3rd and 22 from midfield.
Right.
Like, those are the things that just are happening consistently. And, I think that just comes with having 63 new players on the roster this year. But yeah, so I mean, that was kind of my thoughts.
I agree. Even going back and watching the Cincinnati game, again, turnovers at the wrong time. You're driving the ball down the field. And if I remember right, at least 2 of those were red zone, I think, turnovers. And you have to think that if we're able to score there instead of turn the ball over, because I believe Cincinnati scored every time we turned the ball over, that's a pretty big, turnaround. That's a pretty big point swing right there. They're not scoring, but we are. The game's going to be a lot closer. We may not win the game, but at least we're looking competitive. We're scoring. We're trying to keep up as much as we can, and hopefully the defense is able to keep them, from scoring points, and allows us to at least try to score again to get a lead on that. But I'm with you. That's game changers. I don't have a problem with the offense. the plays that are being called, it's the execution on the field. That's really the biggest thing here. That even Stephon Johnson with that big catch up the middle, it looked like he was going to go for a big gain and then not protecting the ball, and the defensive player comes in, knocks right out. And if I remember right there, I think Iowa State scored on that turnover also. So we do have a really bad problem with turning the ball over, allowing them to score on those turnovers, and then us going 3 and out or penalty and we get pushed back. We keep shooting ourselves in the foot, And what is the thing that Coach Fritz kept preaching is Cougs don't beat Cougs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to be happening quite a bit each and every single game. And how can they turn this thing around? I know y'all saw my comment after the game and my feelings on the quarterback play, really, and who I'm hoping that we can still get in the game to at least get some snaps, and that's Uiale, obviously, but you have to think that if we're going to the third string quarterback, where we've got Donovan Smith as the starter, you have Zion Chris that we were hoping would be a backup, picking up the offense and getting himself ready to take over maybe next year, right? In while we're waiting on Henderson to for a couple more years to graduate, or even Carlisle coming in next year and getting a good feel for the offense. I think a lot of people don't want to see us go to the third string quarterback, but as of right now, we're averaging 10 points a game through 4 games. Smith has 2 touchdowns, I believe, 5 interceptions. Zion was 1 for 4 last game with 1 for 1 yard. It just something needs to change, and the only thing that I could think that needs to change is with the guy that touches the ball offensively every single play, right? Because no matter how you look at it, offense just is not getting things done. And if everything starts at the QB position, then to me, that's where, unfortunately, we probably have to make the most drastic changes. But that is my opinion. And, if anyone else shares that opinion, I'm sure other people do, right? But in my mind, we got to get somebody else in there.
It's one of those things, like you see it a lot with like coaches, right? Where it's like, well, hey, you can't fire the team, so you fire the coach, right? Like,
right.
Sometimes you're, and I think actually Willie and Kevin both said this week in interviews, like you're looking for a spark. We're looking for a guy to come in and give a spark, right? And so, not necessarily that either of those guys are, horrible or fantastic, but you're just looking for someone who can kind of galvanize the troops. Because I think, I saw someone was like, hey, throw Ollie in, like, what do you have to lose? Well, candidly, what you have to lose is the locker room, right? And my concern with putting in Uiale, if it's perceived this way by the team, is, well, hey, this is kind of us giving up on this season and wanting to see what we have for next year, right? Like kind of moving on from Donovan and saying, Zion and Ui, that can do some damage, right? It can be perceived negatively, and not that it necessarily will, but that would be my, concern. Maybe if you go to the third string, like that really sends up some red flags that room is in really, really tough shape.
Well, 2 straight shutouts, I believe, can do that to a team.
Well, no, right? that's fair, Kevin.
I mean, we can stay on our present course, but we all know that even coming in the Big 12, that is a scoring league, right? That you need to be able to score in this league to be able to keep up with the other teams. And if we're averaging a third of what everybody else is averaging on the field offensively, as far as points goes, you have to stop worrying about protecting people's feelings and start to really see if something else is going to work for you. Because I don't know if I can take another shutout this upcoming Friday against TCU. Now, TCU, defensively, offensively, they're a little off from where they were a couple of years ago, right? In a national championship game. We've seen them kind of recede a little bit, but I think we felt the same way about Cincinnati. I didn't think Iowa State. I think a lot of people thought the game would be a little bit closer with Iowa State. But right now, what makes me nervous more than anything else is just that inability to just score even a field goal. I mean, we're not really getting we're not getting a lot of plays in the red zone. We're not giving ourselves an opportunity to score any points. And it looks like Demetrius Hunter Sr.'s in the room right now, giving us some comments, telling us that, if we can't throw the ball down the field, we can't win. If we can't run the ball, what other options do we have? Now, a run game seems to be doing well. We're just not doing very much of it. And maybe that's just.
Well, no. I mean, they've committed to the run. Like you're doing a lot of run, and I think I think the problem when you try to dig into the numbers with this Houston team is it can be a little bit misleading because again, so many of these drives end very abruptly with turnovers. So like, I think part of
it's momentum killer.
Yeah, and part of this, part of the way Kevin Barbet wants to call a game is to get a first down. So run the ball on first down. Minimum 2 to 3 yards. Hopefully you get more. Maybe you run it again, get to third and manageable. Throw the ball, get a first down, and now we can hit tempo. Now we can take a shot downfield. Now we can run some play action. But you have to get that first down to get a drive started. And that's what you've seen is when they've been able to get that first down, like things start to click, and then it's ended abruptly. And so I think like from a balanced perspective of play calling, like you'd probably see a lot more passes if we didn't have so many turnovers. I know
if we started on the ball the other team, we'd probably be able to throw a little bit more.
Yeah, I know that sounds very like obvious on the face of it, but I think like there's something true to it, which is like, hey, like throwing the ball on the first play of a drive, there's a reason that's not a Kevin Barbet thing. That's a lot of offensive play callers because guess what? If you don't complete the throw, now you're 2nd and 10. So you've got to likely throw it again because you're not going to, you're not expecting to get 5+ yards on second down. Run. If that one doesn't go, like you put yourself behind the stick so quickly. And so that's what that's a philosophy of a lot of offensive play callers is get the first down and then open things up. And so, I think you'd see a lot more if we could get a little bit more execution more consistently on those first couple plays of the drive.
No, I agree. I think an incomplete pass on first down is, especially with this offense, it's a bit deflating at this point in time. But I think most of our miscues are it's just very deflating at this point because they seem to be magnified, especially whenever you can't score the ball. But I think that's a good segue into this weekend's matchup against TCU. We have Jamie Plunkett coming in to talk about TCU. So let's go ahead. Let's bring him up, and we can continue talking about our offensive woes after we talk to Jamie a little bit about the game coming up this weekend. Hey there, Jamie. How you doing today?
I'm good, fellas. How are y'all?
Oh, we're here. Talking about some good things from last weekend, but we're very happy to have you join us today. Talk a little about the matchup this weekend. So you have the floor now, sir.
Man, looking forward to this game. Before the Kansas win, I think TCU fans were kind of in the same boat as Houston fans, where it's just like, hey, we're 1 week closer to basketball season, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I'm looking forward to this game on Friday night. TCU fans, again, they thought they left Friday night games behind when they got out of the Mountain West. I'm sure Houston fans felt the same way, but here we are on a Friday night in Fort Worth. Looking forward to this game. I think that it's going to be a really interesting matchup between these two teams because you have a defense in Houston's that has been really good against the pass. I know you haven't seen it quite as often as the run game, Abu Sama and Iowa State running the ball a lot. But, TCU has, I was looking at it earlier today, every single game they've attempted at least 30 passes. Only twice have they thrown it less than 40 times. Houston has only seen one team hit that 30 pass attempts mark. So I'm really intrigued by how TCU will attack this defense and how Houston's defense will respond to a team that is throw first instead of run first. So looking forward to that matchup.
Yeah, Jamie, I was watching some film in preparation for this conversation, and one of the things that I was utterly floored by is, I mean, obviously we know what a Kendall Briles offense is going to look like, but it is jarring to see just how much they throw the football. But rightfully so, when you've got, I mean, 4 wide receivers who are maybe some of the most electric in the country. I think it's probably one of the deepest rooms, top to bottom. Talk to us a little bit about those guys, because I know obviously Josh Besh, is that how I pronounce that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I think maybe the go-to guy, but there's several names in that room that we should probably be aware of.
Yeah, Jack Besh is the leading receiver right now. Fun fact: he's got more receiving yards through the first 5 games of this season than any TCU receiver had all of last year. So that's the pace that he's on. Currently, he's on pace for like 1,800 receiving yards or something ridiculous. Wow. Having an excellent season. But beyond him, you've got Savion Williams, who feels like he's been around forever. He's had hot and cold games throughout his career. He's been able to kind of just do his thing and take a back seat this season, which has been really nice for him. He backed up Quentin Johnston for a couple of years, and then last year was really the only healthy receiver that TCU had consistently, and there was a lot of pressure on him to perform. Now he's got Jack Besh opposite of him. He's got a healthy J.P. Richardson in the slot. Eric McAllister transferred in from Boise State. Has had a couple really good games. You know, Jack Besh and Eric McAllister are the first 2 TCU receiving teammates in program history to both post back-to-back 100-yard receiving games in the same game, if that makes sense, if you followed me there. Mm-hmm. They've both posted 100-yard receiving games the last 2 games. Josh Hoover's just slinging it. He's reading the field really well. He's thrown a couple picks here and there. He's starting to kind of lean into a gunslinger mentality when he needs to probably be a little bit more efficient. But the reality is that when you've got a receiver room that's as deep as TCU's, haven't even talked about JoJo Earl, haven't talked about the tight ends or any of that, why not air it out, you know?
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the running game, so I'll bring it up. Cam Cook obviously is the bell cow there, but I think against Kansas, we kind of had maybe the emergence of Jeremy Payne, which is a name Houston fans will be familiar with. They, were trying hard to get into that conversation, and obviously he's a Houston kid from Hightower. What does that room look like? What are the thoughts and sentiments there as of today?
Yeah, Cam Cook is the reason TCU didn't really portal anybody at that position, because he had an excellent spring. And so the TCU staff was really pleased with him this spring. Obviously, they had they had Jeremy Payne coming in this fall. He looked pretty good, was still pretty raw as a true freshman. And so they ended up giving a lot of the secondary carries to Dominique Johnson and Trey Sanders, who's been in the program for a minute. Neither of those 2 behind Cam Cook were really running the ball well. Cam wasn't even really running the ball well. TCU's offensive line was struggling to block up the run. And so they started to give Jeremy a few more snaps over the last few weeks. He's shown a good amount of explosiveness, going all the way back to his Hightower days. Everybody knows he's got that top end speed and that shiftiness, but he's been hitting the holes really, really well for a smaller kid. And I think we're going to see more and more of him as the season progresses. We'll definitely see a lot of him on Friday night against Houston, because Sonny Dykes pretty much confirmed that earlier this week. There's splits from a snap count perspective. Cam Cook had 40 against Kansas. Jeremy Payne had 26, but they were about even in the fourth quarter. TCU went on this 6-minute drive that ended in a touchdown that really kind of finished that game off against Kansas, and both of those guys had some really big carries in that drive. So I'm not sure exactly what the split difference will be, but I'm sure we're going to see pretty close to even when it comes to carries for Cam Cook and Jeremy Payne moving forward.
Nice. And I think obviously there was some mixed feelings going into the season around Josh Hoover, from my understanding, amongst it seems like statistically he's had an okay year. I mean, obviously putting up a ton of yards and some good touchdowns, but has a lot of turnovers, which is something we're kind of familiar with as well over here. what are the thoughts around Josh at this point, and what do you think? What do you think lies ahead for him the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a kid who, in his first, I believe it's 10 starts now, has thrown for over 300 yards in 8 of them. So, I mean, he loves to throw the football. He loves this offense, and he's worked really hard to find some balance between being the most efficient version of himself and being the most fearless version of himself. And when he leans into that fearlessness is when he starts to make some bad decisions, throw the ball where he probably shouldn't, gets picked off. We've seen that a couple times in the last few weeks. He was really good. He didn't have an interception thrown through the first 3 weeks of the season, which was a nice relief for TCU fans. Kind of fallen back into some bad habits the last 2 weeks, but is still completing the ball and getting it out really, really well for the most part. And when you throw the ball 52 times in a game like he did against, I believe it was UCF, you're gonna risk some turnovers there. But I think TCU fans are really pleased with Josh Hoover's development to this point, realizing that he still hasn't started a full season's worth of games. He's just a sophomore, and he's got a really bright future ahead of him. He's got a great arm, he's got great accuracy, and you've already talked about the wide receivers that he gets to throw to. So he's got to continue to be the most efficient version of himself and make the right decision every time. But he's definitely progressing in that direction. I think TCU fans are really pleased with him.
Nice. So from your perspective, what is the matchup you're most interested to see this weekend?
TCU has seen a ton of mobile quarterbacks to start the year, and that's not going to stop with Houston. I know the offense has struggled mightily this year, but TCU's run defense has been pretty problematic through the first half of the season. They gave up 527 combined rushing yards between the UCF and SMU games. Got it a little bit in control against Kansas, but the reality is that Kansas was running the ball at almost a 5 yards per carry clip. They just, for whatever reason, stopped running the ball. They were asking Jalen Daniels to stand up tall in the pocket and be a passer, and honestly, I think Jeff Grimes should probably be in jail for that at this point. When you've got Jalen Daniels and Devin Neal, run the football, man. They threw it as many times as they ran it against TCU. It made no sense, but TCU fans are fine with that. They'll take the win and leave. So I would expect Houston to have some success running the football, whether it's with either your quarterbacks or your running backs, because the reality is that TCU's defensive front doesn't always fit gaps with great discipline. Some guys try to play hero ball here and there, and that gets them in trouble a little bit. So I would expect Houston to be able to move the football on the ground a little bit. I'm interested to see how TCU responds if they start to get some rhythm in that regard. Another thing to note, too, is that TCU's defensive coordinator moved from the booth down to the sideline at halftime of the Kansas game, and that's how it's going to be moving forward. So it'll be interesting to see how the defense tightens up now that the DC's within an arm's reach of them.
In our experience, we went last year with Mr. Doug Belk. He probably moved up and down from the booth, I don't know, 3 or 4 times last year. Did not make much of a difference for us. So I hope you guys have better luck with that change.
We'll see. Hey, I'll say this: when he made this, so TCU gave up a touchdown on each of Kansas's first 2 drives of the game, and then only 13 points over the next 10. So maybe that had something to do with it. A little bit of fear factor there, or maybe they just finally figured out how to fit the run. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting you bring up that defensive line, because I think in the last 2 years that had really been a strength of TCU. And still, I mean, you look at just from a physicality perspective, tons of 4 stars on that defensive line. All of them are over, 6 foot, 300+ pound guys. Hakeem Ajijalaya, who is a Houston transfer, he probably would have been maybe not starting, but definitely seeing a huge bulk of snaps here. He's, I think, listed 3rd on your depth chart. So it's a very deep room. But yeah, you're right. For whatever reason, just maybe, not super gap disciplined. And something that I found interesting watching that SMU game was the way SMU used the quarterback run in that kind of read option into the RPO, read pass game. They ran the ball, I believe, 45 times and threw it 19. That is exactly the kind of game Houston wants to have. I will be curious to see, I think, for our fans, we're kind of in the midst of a quarterback battle right now where kind of everybody's getting to play. We rotated quarterbacks last game. This to me actually seems like a game where we could see a lot of Zion Chris. He's not quite the thrower that Kevin Jennings is, as silly as that may sound, because Kevin Jennings is not a great thrower of the football, but I think Zion Chris is maybe even a more dynamic runner than Kevin Jennings is. So I think I would not be shocked if we see a lot of that this game.
Yeah, I mean that's the way you can get to this TCU defense is that exact balance of, hey, we're going to go heavy with the run and try to keep you as honest as possible through the air when we need to, because TCU just has not handled a mobile quarterback well this year, going all the way back to week 1 with Stanford's Ashton Daniels. He had 2 or 3 really large runs. One was a scramble, 2 were designed. One of the designed runs came on like 3rd and 19. He ended up running for about 40 yards for a first down, and it's really interesting. It's definitely a storyline to watch. Like I said, I do expect Houston to have some success moving the ball on the ground on Friday night.
Now, out of curiosity, because I know in the past the TCU secondary, I mean, guys like Josh Newton and Avery Helm last year. I know fans weren't exactly thrilled with Avery's performance at times last year, but still, I mean, that was a really talented room. Obviously, Josh moved on. I believe Avery got hurt like before the season started. What does that room look like at this point?
Well, they're down their top 2 cornerbacks this year because Avery Helm hurt his knee in fall camp and was out for the year, and so did Vernon Glover. So there's cornerback 1 and 2 off the board before the season even starts. So they are using Utah transferred to Travis Broughton, who had a great week 1, has struggled the past few weeks. On the other side, they've got Old Dominion transfer Lamarian James. He goes by Scud. He's had a really good start to the season. He's been a pretty solid lockdown corner. He had kind of the game-sealing interception against Kansas last week. Broughton has struggled to the point where Channing Canada, who was a JUCO transfer before last season, has started to see more snaps. He actually outsnapped Broughton almost 2-1 in the Kansas game because Broughton got a couple penalties early and got the hook. Canada had a pretty solid game. Again, Kansas tried to throw the ball more than they probably should have, and Canada had a couple pass breakups, looked really good in coverage for the most part, and I think we'll probably end up seeing more of 7 than 13 against Houston. And then from a safety standpoint, it's all the old familiar faces. Bud Clark and Abe Kamara are still roaming back there. Sophomore Jamel Johnson is back there as well again this year. So a really experienced group in that secondary. But corner is definitely something to keep an eye on. Whether 13 or 7 is out there a little bit more will be an interesting storyline in this one. Yeah,
Jamel Johnson does a lot in the run game too. If I remember correctly, it kind of shocked me, like watching some tape. Like I kept seeing this. I think he's like number 2 or something.
Yep.
I was like, man, that's a low digit number to be in the box so often, and he gets downhill quick, man. He will get in there and make some tackles.
Yeah, he loves to be physical. He loves to hit people. Abe Kamara is another one too. If you go watch the Kansas game, he got really good positioning on a couple of option plays that Kansas tried to run and just fully ruined that experience for Jalen Daniels. I think he picked him up and body slammed him at one point. Unfortunately, didn't get a flag. TCU safeties love to get downhill and hit you. When you have them in coverage for 5, 6, 7 seconds, that's when they can get into some trouble. So they do help in the run game quite a bit, but that front 7's got to be better against the run if TCU wants to have defensive success.
Now does TCU, because I know at times they've ran more of that 3-3 stack, and at times they've kind of shifted that outside linebacker down into more of like a 4-2-5 kind of look, even though it's the same 3-3 stack principles. What is kind of the base defense look that we can expect, and do you expect any kind of changes from that this week?
Yeah, so this is year 1 with new defensive coordinator Andy Avalos. Joe Gillespie from the last few years got fired in the offseason, and TCU fans were really excited to get away from the 3-3-5 because we all saw the Georgia National Championship game. We saw how bad TCU's defense was for the majority of 2023, and as talented as those defensive linemen were individually, they just couldn't generate any pressure that was significant enough to get quarterbacks uncomfortable. bringing in Andy Avalos, who was obviously the former head coach at Boise State, defensive coordinator at Oregon. TCU fans were looking forward to 4 down linemen, more blitzing, exotic blitzing, that kind of stuff. Haven't quite seen a lot of that. We've actually seen a lot of 3 down linemen and then a hybrid linebacker edge. It's called the stud position. That's Cooper McDonald, number 44, kind of holds that role. And I think it's frustrated TCU fans because the expectation was that this was going to be a defense that was much more successful against the run, and that hasn't been the case. I don't know how much we see them move away from that in this game, because one of the things that we heard after the Kansas game was that they actually simplified the playbook a little bit, got back to the basics, and that's why we saw them have some more success. So it might just be a matter of, hey, we're getting back to the simple, just don't think and go do situation for this defense, where they're playing mostly out of their base and just trying to be disciplined enough to do the things that they're supposed to do instead of playing this hero football that we've seen in the first quarter of the season. So I don't know that we're going to necessarily see any scheme changes from the first 5 weeks, but expect a more simplified playbook from the defense. 3 down linemen and a stud, 2 linebackers, and then five secondary.
So I will say, like, from a Houston perspective, honestly, it's probably good news, because I think the one thing Houston has really struggled with consistently throughout the season so far is folks not doing what they're supposed to do defensively, right? Like the UNLV game, for example, all off season, U of H had been watching tape. They were in an odd front, and then they come out game 1 even, 4 down linemen instead of 3. And whenever folks have kind of mixed things up, any kind of stunts and twists, exotic, looks, the offensive line has had real trouble with it. But as they've gotten kind of more into conference play and had a little bit more just like simplified defenses, like Iowa State didn't do anything. They were in their base defense all game, made it a lot easier for them to have a little bit of success.
Yeah, I think this is kind of why I said earlier, I think Houston's going to have some more success in this game than they've seen the past couple of weeks, because TCU's offensive line is the same way. They've really struggled up front at times, especially against big physical defensive linemen. I know Houston's got a couple of those guys, even without Hakeem on the roster still. So another thing to look for is, how does TCU's line block up the run? They started a new right tackle against Kansas. He was much more physical than the guy who started the year. The backup right guard has seen more and more snaps over the last couple of weeks as they try to shore up that side of the line. And so, this is going to be a battle. And I said this before the UCF game as well, when I was doing some stuff with the guys that cover that team, is it's really just going to be a battle, in my opinion, of which offensive line can hold up the best, because that one is going to probably lead their offense to a little bit more success, and that team's going to come out on top.
Well, Jamie, I appreciate your time with us. Before we let you go, two things. First, give us your prediction. How do you see this one playing out? Maybe a score if you're inclined. And then where can folks find you?
Sure. I do think, year 1, Willie Fritz, it's tough. I think he's going to long-term turn that program around. I think he's a really great fit down there in Houston. I know he really wanted that job. I think I saw a line on this one at TCU, like 15.5 or 16.5. Feels like a lot of points. TCU's 1-4 against the spread so far this year. So I do think the Frogs get the win. I don't think it happens by more than 2 touchdowns, maybe like 10 points or so. I think Houston breaks their scoreless streak in this one as well. So give me the Frogs somewhere around 21 to 13-ish, maybe like a 7-8 point win, something like that, in a relatively low scoring affair. And then y'all can find me. I'm on Twitter at Frog Preacher, and then all my writings over at the TCU 24/7 site, hornedfrogblitz.com.
Good deal. Well, I think it's very fair, Jamie. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right, guys. Take care.
Appreciate it, Jamie. Thanks. All right. Well, that was some good stuff from Jamie. Let's go ahead and just give our thoughts about the game. Well, how do you see this one playing out, Gatlin? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jamie's thoughts are pretty reasonable. I'm obviously a U of H fan, so I'm going to try to talk myself into this one because I think if you look at the schedule and you say, where is Houston going to find their second win of the season? I think it has to come here. I think this is probably one of their best opportunities left on the schedule. TCU is pretty horrible defensively. I think you can run the ball against them. You don't need to drive the ball downfield in order to have success. Like, it plays into Houston's strengths offensively. On the defensive side of the ball, I think Houston can cause some trouble. Again, TCU is tied with Houston at -6 in turnover margin, 121st in the country. So I think this is an opportunity for Houston's defense to be aggressive, make Josh Hoover uncomfortable, force him into a couple bad throws. And if you can walk out of this game with a plus turnover margin, it would be the first time this season Houston has been positive. They've been equal. They've never been positive in the turnover margin this season. I think if you can do that, you can walk out of this game with a win.
All right, that's pretty bold. I wish I had that optimism, but just the offensive woes that this team has had this year, and that's why I didn't give a prediction. A couple weeks back, I wasn't on the show last week because I just don't know what offense is going to show up week to week. And what worries me sometimes is if teams can make us one-dimensional, if they can take away the pass, which we're kind of helping them out with in some regards also, they can stack the line. They can blitz a little bit more on third and longs and things like that and really disrupt our offense because it's been working. It's what other teams have been doing, right? It's very tough for me to give you a prediction to win a game until we start.
Give me this. How many points do you think Houston needs to score in order to be able to win
against TCU or against
TCU this week?
I honestly, I think 3 touchdowns. We need to score at least 21 points, I think, to win. That's what I think.
I agree. I'll give it one more. I think you need 3 touchdowns, and I think you need 1 non-offensive touchdown. So special teams, which TCU has given up, I want to say at least 2 special teams touchdowns this year, and multiple defensive touchdowns. So I say if you can get 1 touchdown from defense or special teams, and Houston 421. I think you can hold TCU to below 28. But I don't think you hold them to much lower than that. I think their season average is something like 38 points a game. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, they turn the ball over, but they throw the ball so much. They have so many snaps. Like, they can score in an instant. So I think you're right. Houston will have to put up some points this week. But call me crazy. I think they can do it. If they can't do it this week, I don't see another win on this schedule. I think this is the best matchup for what Houston does in order to go and get their second win.
Yeah, Baylor would be the next one, and that's
fair enough.
Game,
yeah, Baylor. Yeah, but if that's the case, then you're looking into in October or November.
It's November. It's November. Yeah. And I'm with you. I want to be optimistic. I want to be hopeful. But until I see a better offensive play, better passing game, less turnovers, like you're saying, more plays in the red zone because we just can't seem to get there. I'd like to see a close game for sure. But just until I see this offense clicking the way that I think that they can do it, it's very tough for me to go to pick UH to win a game this season moving forward. Maybe Baylor, but who really knows at this point? Because that's still 6 weeks from now, and who knows what kind of changes can be implemented until then, or gosh, yeah, I can see us picking up a win if we're able to score the ball, but since we haven't been able to score it in the last 2 games, I'm not feeling as optimistic probably as other people. Do I hope we see some scoring on with this offense and hopefully with the defense? Yes. Until I see it, though, it's very tough for me to give a win prediction for the Cougars this week. And look, I always want them to win every single week, obviously, but I'm just trying to be realistic and rational at this point.
More than fair, Kevin. I'll go ahead and plant a flag in the ground. I'll say 28-24. Houston gets the win.
All right, that sounds good. I since I'm saying 3 touchdowns, I think it'd be a lot closer if we're able to win the game. I could see a 21-20 ball game. Okay, I can see something that close, but I can also see a 38-10 ball game. I can kind of see it both ways in many regards, because the more offensive goals we have, the more time the defense is spending on the field, right? And eventually the defense is going to tire out with things. It's just the way that it always seems to work when you have an offense that can't move the ball, that gets a ton of 3 and outs, that keeps turning the ball over. It puts a lot of stress on the defense, So I can see this game going either way. I can see a 21-20 Houston win, but I could also see a 38-10 loss to TCU. I can see it both ways.
You bring up a fair point. I mean, especially, to the point Jamie brought up, like this secondary has not been tested in its depth per se, right? Because you've had the ability with teams not throwing the ball as much to play, your top 2 guys for most of the game at cornerback, and like with some rotation, but against TCU, you're going to have a lot of 4 and 5 wide sets. So you'll have your nickel corner in, like, you're going to get down to your 4th and 5th guys rotating in. Like, what happens then? Is TCU will take advantage? Because one of the things they will do, they will tempo you. They will run no huddle and tempo so fast it will make your hair stand up. And I don't think Houston has seen anything like that so far this year. And I remember last year, that first drive, it was jarring for the defense. They, hit them with a couple plays, no huddle, boom, 40-yard touchdown. I mean, Kendall Briles is a lot of things, but one of them is an offensive genius. Like he points. So I think you're fair, Kevin. I certainly will hold down the fort as the optimist, and you can be our resident realist.
All right, that sounds good to me. All right. Well, I really don't have anything else, Gatlin, unless you got some other things that you want to go over before we shut things down for the night. Looks like we're at about the 50-minute mark, but we're hitting the 8 o'clock time also. So I think we're doing good as far as time goes. Hopefully Rob can get his internet situation fixed, and who knows if Blake's going to be playing in another intramural game next Wednesday. But we'll hope to have him back, and hopefully Blake can push out some predictions for Rob and himself also over Twitter before we get to the game this Friday. I appreciate everybody stopping in, listening, commenting. Please be sure to give us a thumbs up. Please be sure to subscribe, push the notification button so you get notifications whenever we get anything that hits the airwaves here on YouTube. And as always, check us out on Twitter at Cougar Digest. We got, several of us who are, posting things on there pretty often, different updates, different stories, different videos, different whatever. And as always, Cougar Digest, come by, chat on the board, sign up. Always have a lot of information flowing on the board.
Kevin, as you pointed out, there was some interesting news dropped on the board for the VIP members this morning. So if you haven't read that, go and check it out. And if you're curious about what's going on, there is some interesting things transpiring. So go sign up and check that out.
I like that little carrot, dingle that carrot out and get people to go and chase it. I like that. All right, Gatlin, appreciate you being here. Appreciate you bringing this this analyst mind that you got whenever it comes to watching these games, because I don't have enough time to do this stuff. But we'll get back next week after the game for another preview of the next matchup. But as always, like, subscribe, check us out on the board, follow us on Twitter. Any way that you can follow us, please do. And we'll see everybody again soon.
Thanks.